Let's start at the very beginning. Hello Insiders, and welcome to my review of Inside Number 9 Series 1 Episode 1. That's right, you asked for it and I delivered. So today we're going to look back at the very first episode, Sardines. It's the one that started it all, it's a stone cold classic, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it. So go grab yourself a cheeky top up from Feed the Birds, don't forget your carbolic soap, and join us in the wardrobe, where I'm pretty sure we still have a bit of room. So, Sardines turned out to be a great introduction to the world of Inside Number 9 and really helped to set the tone for the show going forward. We got plenty of humour from the weird scenario of a group of adults playing a children's party game, lots of interpersonal conflict, but with that great British awkwardness, and an incredibly dark twist both in what is revealed about the past and in what's about to happen after the credits. But while I'm assuming that most of you have already seen Sardines along with the final episode plodding on, I'll be keeping the more explicit references to the plot until later on in the spoiler talk, just in case anyone is watching to decide whether or not the show is for them. Or maybe a friend has sent you this video to convince you to start watching Inside Number 9, in which case I say do it. Though I will say the twist reveals in Sardines are very dark indeed, and it's why this episode was one of the first ones I talked about in my old Most Disturbing Episodes videos, which will be revisited soon to include series 5 to 9. Anyway, Sardines sets something of a tradition in having a number 9 series opening with a relatively large cast of British comedy actors. I mean, a relatively large cast for this show, which often features just 3 or 4 actors per episode. And we know we're off to a great start when we see the IT crowd's Catherine Parkinson finding Alan Partridge actor Tim Key in a wardrobe. Let the games commence. One by one, they're joined in the increasingly cramped space by the rest of the cast, including Anne Reid from Dinner Ladies, Julian Rin-Tut from Green Wing, and Mark Wootton from 90 Nights. And of course, we have the show's creators Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith in acting roles, this time playing a gay couple with Steve as the reserved and slightly prudish Carol, and Reece hamming it up as the flamboyant Stuart, whose antics and outspokenness frequently become a source of annoyance for his other half. It's an interesting dynamic, and one we might not have expected that way around after seeing Steve as the Queen of Dweisburg in The League of Gentlemen. Although they might also be a little reminiscent of Charlie and Stella, albeit a lot less bitter. The setting this time is in a lavish country manor, although the action is confined within the one room, plus ensuite. The reason they're all playing the game is as an icebreaker for the youngest daughter's engagement party, which I think is still a bit weird, but hey, maybe that's what rich people get up to at parties. I wouldn't know. Just in case anyone's unfamiliar with the game, Sardines is a kind of reverse hide and seek where one person hides, everyone else has to find them, and when they do, they must attempt to squeeze in beside them and hide as well. There's no way to win, but the loser would be the last person to find the rest of the group, and then they'd be the one to hide in the next round. But here, no matter how much some of the characters insist that it's such a laugh, the game is pretty much devoid of all fun and leaves the guests with prolonged silences, awkward conversations, and being much too close for comfort. And that's before Stinky John joins the party. As Rebecca puts it, nobody wins, you just wait. It'll be a familiar vibe for anyone who's experienced the joy of forced frivolity, or even the dreaded team-building exercise, and it makes us extremely grateful that we are outside of the cupboard looking in, though this second-hand claustrophobia feels very, very real. The conflicting personalities and interests are there right from the start, and only get worse as the game progresses. We have Rebecca, who's determined that everyone else is having fun and is frequently getting mixed up with her fiance's ex, Rachel, who's also at the party for some reason, and it seems that the spark between her and Jeremy might not have gone out completely. Rachel's new boyfriend Lee keeps upsetting Geraldine, the family's former nanny who was invited along to serve drinks, but got the wrong end of the stick and believes she's been invited as a guest. She's also silenced on several occasions after making references to the family's past, but we'll get to that a bit later. We also have Mark and Liz, who are there purely to schmooze business contacts and want to leave as soon as possible, Stinky John, who nobody wants to hide with, and Ian, the most boring and socially inept person you could ever find yourself trapped with. There's a lot of subtle humour going on, driven by the fact that most of the characters don't really want to be here, but are just far too polite to say anything. Plus, the second anyone is about to say anything of real substance, they're quickly hushed up and made to continue with the charade. I especially like that Liz wants to leave and is ready with some half-baked excuse about the babysitter being ill, but instead of just saying this, she feels that it has to be ceded, even though everyone else has already overheard that part of the conversation. It ended up being a fun, self-aware take on how number 9 writes its twists, which also have to be well seeded. Plus, it shows an interesting parallel between the rules of social engagements and the rules of the party game, which the characters feel obliged to stick rigidly to, even though nobody is technically forcing them and no one's enjoying it. Just smile, make some quiet small talk, and pretend you're having fun. And that's why I'm absolutely rubbish at this kind of activity. Of course, it's only a matter of time before tensions boil over and wildcard Geraldine spills the beans on the whole affair. So if you haven't seen Sardines yet, this is your last chance to pop out of the cupboard for some fresh air before I give away the ending. It's okay if you're leaving early, and I couldn't help but notice that you were worried about the babysitter. Well seeded. Anyway, thank you for playing, and why don't you pop back in once you've seen the twist? Plus, I'll be making a few references to Plodding On, so I'd recommend seeing that one too. Okay, so for the rest of you sardines still in the tin, you'll all be painfully aware of why I haven't mentioned Andrew just yet. Because, effectively, the episode has 2 twists which are interlinked. There's Pip's real intentions, along with the reveal of who he really is, and also of Andrew's dark past, and, while it's not explicitly stated, the script leaves very little to the imagination. To put it bluntly, he's a nonce. What? An elderly gentleman on the BBC? Perish the thought. But it's something that ends up shedding a lot more light on the other characters. It reveals John to be a tragic rather than a joke character, as this is implied to be the reason why he stopped washing himself, and why the smell of carbolic soap seems to be a PTSD trigger for him. Andrew's defence at the Scouts Jamboree that he was teaching the boy how to wash himself says it all, and the fact that he'd paid Pip's family to move out of the country seems to confirm his wrongdoings. But there's also the heavy implications that Carl, as a boy, either witnessed something happening to one of his friends, or, and I think this is where they were hinting, that he was also being abused by his own father. This would explain his intimacy issues with Stuart, along with his discomfort of being back in the room where this all allegedly took place. Of course, this part of the story is not played for laughs, and it's where the episode veers towards its dark conclusion, with Andrew's former victim Pip locking the wardrobe door and preparing to set it ablaze. And he's so blinded by his need for revenge that he's about to take plenty of innocent lives as well. Even if Pip did consider Geraldine, Rebecca, Carl and John to be complicit in Andrew's actions by not speaking up, and we're not even sure how much Rebecca knew or Geraldine understood, we can hardly blame Stuart, Rachel, Jeremy, Mark, Liz or Lee, who were never involved. I don't even think that Lee was born when these incidents took place. And it's disturbing to think that this was all planned in advance, as it was Pip who chose the hiding place, presumably because it's next to where the abuse took place and the wardrobe could be locked from the outside, and that he crashed a party and posed as someone else, all the while with lighter fluid in his pocket ready to do the deed. In many ways, Pip is the monster that Andrew created. The horrors that he was subjected to have clearly stayed with him, and as his innocence wasn't spared, he will not spare the innocent in his revenge. But going back to Andrew and the whole family dynamic, I often wonder exactly how much Rebecca knew or understood about the abuse. Because she would have been very young back when it all happened, but it definitely seems like she's aware of her father's past allegations as an adult, and that there are some things that the family just doesn't talk about. But whether or not she knows the full story, or if she believes that her father did these things, isn't clear, and there's no indication that anything ever happened to her. But still, we have Carl making comments of "look where we are" and about waiting for his bossy little sister to find him, but she never could. The way he says this even feels a little tragic, as if he wanted Rebecca to reach out to him or to save him back when they were little. One easily missable detail is the mention of an older sister called Caroline who has decided not to attend the party. Rebecca dismisses this, saying something rather unconvincing about the drive there being too difficult, but Geraldine keeps talking and mentioning the boys and how big they must have gotten. So it appears that Caroline has sons and has decided not to bring them to her father's house. Now, this to me implies that the older sister knows about the abuse allegations and has concerns about having her boys around their grandfather, which is incredibly dark when we think about it. The fact that they are related doesn't seem to factor in here, and knowing that Carol, their uncle, might also be a victim, makes it sound like Caroline's concerns would be well justified. Clearly, this is a family with a very dark and terrible past that nobody can bring themselves to talk about. So, what happens instead? One of the other abuse victims arrives in secret, and the lot of them get burned to death. Well, presumably they all met with a fiery death, although I'm not quite sure where else this story could have ended after we stopped watching. And maybe this is a stretch, but it seems like a great allegory for the repression and secrecy of sordid details and the damage this can end up doing. Nobody else was going to stand up to Andrew, who was living a charmed life judging by the size of his family home, and so Pip took matters into his own hands. And no, I'm not saying that this was the right thing to do, just that, once again, Pip is the monster that Andrew created through his own horrible and abusive actions, done when Pip was only a child. So, as I remember saying after my first watch of this episode, oh, that took a dark turn. And to think that came at the end of several messages I sent to my sister, who told me to start watching number 9 in the first place, that were full of things like, LOL, why are they all hiding in the cupboard? Turns out that Sardines was less of an icebreaker and more of a fire starter in the end. Twisted fire starter. I'd also like to give a brief mention to the final episode of number 9, Plodding On, which brought back some of the key players of Sardines and had them playing different versions of themselves. I also loved that they did that little homage to the first episode in the beginning with Catherine Parkinson entering the bathroom, even smelling the soap and then finding Tim Key in one of the stalls and squashing in beside him. I like that Tim Key was being so awkward even as himself, which seems to be his thing, and that Catherine kept being mistaken for someone else, just like her character had been in Sardines. But the most hilarious moment absolutely went to Anne Reid, who showed up at the cubicle for a quick toot after hearing that the other two had managed to score some cocaine. Just brilliant, and I nearly died laughing at that. So what's everyone else's opinions on Sardines? The game or the episode? It's all good. And who else started watching number 9 again from the beginning after the show wrapped? As always, I look forward to reading your comments below, and I'm also looking forward to reviewing the next episode, A Quiet Night In. Shout out to all my patrons who get to see these videos early, and if you'd like to join them, you can also access my exclusive episode commentary for Sardines. Remember also to like, subscribe, and feel free to share this with anyone else you think would appreciate Inside Number 9. Thank you for listening, and for being such a great tin full of people.